Good morning. I am at my school. I'm in a classroom right now. No students here. It's pretty empty. But I have a whiteboard, and I wanted to do a short tactical tutorial about flamethrowers and the way they are. I typically see them used in bold action. So this is the typical way that you will see flamethrowers employed is in um, either a flamethrower team with a jeep, or in an engineer group in a larger truck, possibly a Dodge truck if they're Americans, or like something similar, maybe even an armored carrier. Something where it's small enough to sort of still pay off for because it's typically a 5-man group with the engineers. So you don't have a lot of wasted seats in the truck, but still you sort of you have a truck that fits the group, right? Those two ways are the main ways I see flamethrowers employed. Now, let me just talk you through how they each can work, what their benefits are, and maybe some of the detriments. And I also have a little bit of tactics over here. So let's start with the basic one, the flamethrower team. Now, the flamethrower team, it is best employed with the flamethrower inside a jeep behind some line of sight blocking cover, where they can wait and threaten. So they are actually pushing other units away. And the wait and threaten is this one. You have your flamethrower jeep here behind this, like, is a wood, right? And that jeep can actually move 12 inches up. Then you can deploy the flamethrower team 6 inches up from the jeep, and then they can fire their flamethrower another 6 inches. So you have an effective threat range of 24 inches, but you're going to have to move like a little bit to the side at one point. So it's not quite 24 inches behind line of sight blocking cover. The main benefit of this wait and threaten tactics is that people will not move into this area. You will simply keep it clear of enemy targets, especially high-value targets such as tanks, because tanks are really vulnerable to flamethrowers. So they will not move into something like that if they can help it. It's simply too dangerous. Yes, you might feel that you're wasting your flamethrower sitting there, because it still costs, I don't know, what, 50 points or something, right? Plus the jeep. So it's still a lot of points just sitting there, but you are clearing an area of the board where the enemy does not want to move, which is the important point. Sometimes I think that this jeep and a flamethrower is even more valuable just sitting there, not doing anything for a whole game. If it can sit and lock down an enemy tank or an enemy advance, that is perfect. Now, the other way you can use it is with an attack run at the end of a turn. This is important because if you run up your jeep with a flamethrower in it, or it could be whatever, the German equivalent, like a field car or something. If you run that up before the turn ends, the enemy has a chance to respond before you get the flamethrower out. And soft-skin vehicle is really vulnerable. And that flamethrower team is really vulnerable to getting pinned or to having their transport killed with them in it. That will typically mean that it will die with the transport. It's even worse if you move up fairly close to the enemy, because you're going to have to move within 12 of the enemy. If that enemy is an infantry unit, he can charge you, forcing the flamethrower to get out and fight without defensive fire. So that attack run, you have to do it at the end of the turn. If you have the last 2 dice in the bag at the end of a turn, that is a safe attack run. You run your flamethrower jeep up, and you get out and you flame something. But you're going to have to remember how many inches you have in your threat range, right? Because you need the enemy to be within that. If you don't have that, then you're also betting that you will get the first die next turn, which might not always happen, right? And if it doesn't happen, you've lost your flamethrower. So that is bad. So that attack run is always a bit dicey. That is why I say wait and threaten is much better. There's another way to use these, and that is in outflank. I don't typically use a lot of outflank in my armies. I don't want to rely on those order dice to come onto the board with miners, and maybe the German player facing me has Brandenburgers or something that messes it up, or I just don't want to do it. So, but you can, and I've seen it done. I've had it done to me successfully, Andrew. I'm looking at you. Where outflankers come in, they're in the jeep, they move up, they run up to your objective, they get out and they flamethrower you, and you're dead and you're off the objective and they win. That can happen, and because you have 24 inches from the flank, that will actually bring you quite a long way into the board to threaten or clear an objective. So some players will make sure that objectives are within, let's say 12 plus 6, that's 18, plus 3 inches, because you have to be within 3 inches of an objective, so 21 inches from the board edge. That is the golden spot, right? If you can place your objective there, and then you have your jeep with your flamethrower in outflank, that's pretty good. Now, the jeep and flamethrower combo has a lot of downsides as well, and I'm just going to push up my whiteboard here so that you guys can see. There. Right. Snipers are a real threat, right? Because one sniper hit from ambush or whatever can take away the flamethrower, which takes away the whole team. So, because it's a team weapon. They're also really vulnerable. That's a good anti-flamethrower tactics in general, is if the enemy is on ambush, you should not make attack runs against enemies on ambush. Because one, they might shoot your jeep, killing both the jeep and the unit inside it, the flamethrower team, or they might just wait till get out the jeep and then shoot you, and then you've lost a small team. Yeah. And then at the end of the turn, the jeep most likely dies as well because the enemy is closer, right? You're also really threatened by actually running dry. As soon as you run dry with a flamethrower team, that flamethrower team dies and you lose the die. So in kill point scenarios, this is a really big threat. Not very good. You're also in pretty bad shape most often when you've made an attack run or an outflank. You're most often the next turn will put you in a pretty bad spot because you're out of position. The enemy is in a position to kill you, and you're not really in a position unless you get the first die. That is typically a way to lose stuff. And here comes the biggest detriment, that when you lose your flamethrower, you typically also lose your jeep. So you will lose, typically with an attack run from a flamethrower jeep, you will lose 2 dice for one of the enemies. That can be done if you're playing objective points, or if the enemy has a really high value target like a heavy tank or something. You might throw the flamethrower up there just to have that chance of killing that one Death Star unit, or just to have the chance of clearing that one objective that will win you the game. But if you're playing kill points, or if kill point is a concern at all at a tournament, for instance, that will not be so good. So there's a lot of detriments with the flamethrower jeep. Let me talk you through the engineers, which is a better way of running flamethrowers in my mind. So a good engineered squad typically could be like this. This is based off German or Soviet engineers. But you can have similar squads just using Americans or British or whatever. So you'll have a flamethrower, you'll have a rifle, you'll have as many SMGs as you can fit and can afford into the unit. This is to make the unit more killy against infantry. And then if you can have Panzerfausts, you buy Panzerfausts. And you can even, normally I would always advise against buying 2 Panzerfausts, but for this specific type of unit, I think 2 Panzerfausts might actually be a good idea. I'll get back to that. You're going to have a small truck or an armor carrier. And the tactics with these are a little bit different, because if we go back to the wait and threaten, right, an armor carrier can actually move through the terrain, but has a shorter range. So the threat range from an armored carrier and a truck sort of becomes the same, because the truck will have to go around the terrain, whereas the armored carrier goes through it, if it is a tracked carrier, like a universal carrier, brain carrier, right? So a little bit different, but not much. If you can afford it, brain carriers are really, really good, especially because they have 2 weapon systems. They can have 2 LMGs or an LMG and an anti-tank rifle, which means that they can really dish out damage as they move up in their attack run. With a truck, you're going to need to put in MMG on it, which can be done. The truck might then actually be beneficial afterwards, just firing its MMGs from the back lines, right? Moving back and firing. That's a different thing. Right. This is also why both dice here actually have a use, right? If you have an MMG on your truck, if you have weapon systems on your carrier, they have a use. Once they've delivered their flamethrower, their engineers, they still have a use. So you're not trading that 2-to-1 as often. Right. The tactics that can be employed with an engineer team in a truck is, again, the wait and threaten tactics. Although this is maybe not as good with this type of unit, because they become more expensive. So you're putting more points into your threat here that could as easily have been done with less points, just a flamethrower team and a jeep. So it can be done, and it's just as successful, but it's more expensive in points. The attack run at the end of a turn, this is possibly better, because especially if you have an armored carrier and the enemy doesn't really have any anti-tank possibilities to threaten you, then small arms fire, you can take that. That will pin you, but if your engineer's a veteran, you can take that, move up, just weather the fire, and just unload with the engineers. So it's slightly worse with the wait and threaten, but it's slightly better at the attack run at the end of the turn. Again, especially if you have the 2 last dice. You can also do first die attack runs. If you have more dice than the opponent, you can do that with a jeep as well, but it's really dicey. But you can do this successfully especially if you sort of know that you can possibly get 2 dice, then you can push up. And if you have armor carriers, then you can push up even though it's not at the end of the turn. Weather the fire that's incoming and get out. You cannot usually do that with a jeep. So an attack run before the end of the turn is now possible. It's also possible with a truck, simply because, yes, the truck might die, but if there's not any AT guns or like bazookas or panzerfausts, then the truck might also survive, and you could take the pins and get out and kill stuff. That will not really be possible with a jeep flamethrower team. It can also outflank. Again, it's more points, so it becomes more expensive to outflank. And for me, you're throwing points at something that might never happen. It's good when it does happen, but it might never happen. So for me, no. But you can do it, and it can be done very successfully. I've seen Graham from Scotland do this very, very successfully with armored carriers and in outflank. Very, very good, very devastating when they do come on. And it can also do split attacks. This is a really good thing, because you can offend 2 enemy units at once. The best target for an engineer group is if the enemy has a tank and an infantry unit right next to it. Because then you move up, your engineers go out, they will flamethrower and SMG the infantry, possibly killing it, or at least wounding it very badly, and then they'll fire the panzerfausts into the side of the tank. The possibility here is that you kill 2 units with 1 attack. That is definitely worth it. Definitely, 100%. And it's even better if you have a universal carrier that has an AT rifle, and an LMG. Then you will split fire the LMG on the infantry, giving them a few pins, which makes the flamethrower hit even harder. And you'll fire the AT rifle at the tank, giving that a pin, making the Panzerfausts even more deadly if they actually connect and do some damage and the tank survives. Then it's even more pinned. It's really difficult for it to do anything after that. So that split attack is the optimal situation for an engineer group. The downsides, the weaknesses are again ambush. Ambush is if you're moving up to a tank that's on ambush with your universal carrier, it will shoot you with its anti-tank gun if it has one, and that will possibly kill you. So again, you're pretty vulnerable to ambush. Ambush is the best tactics to use against these units. And there's also the problem of next turn, because your units are now deployed, they're on foot. If they're veteran, not so much of a problem, but if they're just regulars, which can save you points, which makes wait and threaten and outflank more worth it, but next turn they will be more vulnerable when they've gotten out and everything is ready to go. So, what do I think you should do? Up to you, but I've just talked you through the possibilities. I think that for many things, the Jeep and a flamethrower team is really, really beneficial. The truck or armor carrier with an engineer team is way more offensive. That can push up. That's an attack unit, where the Jeep with a flamethrower team is a counterpunch unit or a threat and away unit. I hope you could find this useful. Cheers.